I'm Ava, and I consider myself to be a late bloomer athlete. We'll come back to what that actually means in just a moment. But first, I want to go back to something that I did a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, the race begins in exactly 7 minutes. Oh, so nervous.
This is me at the starting line of my first 109 kilometer or 68 mile ultra marathon.
3, 2, 1, go!
In case you're not familiar with the word, an ultra marathon is a very long run, longer than a marathon. That is longer than 42 kilometers or 26 miles. So it could be 40 miles or 60 miles or 100 miles. This particular ultra is 68 miles or 109 kilometers in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. And as you can see, it is rainy, it is cold, and it is hard.
It's just 8 hours in. I've been running and hiking for 8 hours. So I'm trying to regain my energy. But the big question is, why am I doing this?
That's one question I want to answer. But before we get there, I want to give you a little bit of my background because, in all honesty, I used to hate running. Not only that, I used to hate moving my body. I didn't work out properly until I was like 28 years old. So in this video, I want to share my story of going from, really hating running and moving my body to now running ultra marathons. How on earth does that happen? So let's rewind a little bit. When I was in school, in secondary school, I did everything I possibly could to avoid going to PE lessons. I would make up excuses. I would claim that I had my period pretty much on a weekly basis whenever there was swimming lessons involved. I just really hated working out, especially working out in public. Books, that was my thing. Books, not sports, and I hated sports, and I just really came to define myself by being this academic kid, not a sportsy kid. It was sometime after university that I realized that I probably should start doing something to get fit or at least a little bit in shape. So of course I ended up getting a gym membership, and lo and behold, I never went to the gym. I just really disliked the environment. I didn't like all the mirrors in the gym, and I just felt like it wasn't really my place. And at some point I tried running. As you do. A friend invites you to come along for a Sunday run, so you do, and you run and talk for 5 or 6K, and then you go to the pub and have a beer. That's how I did running as a 20-something-year-old. So that's the background that I come from. Someone who was never really very sporty. In fact, someone who avoided sports. I just never found it fun. It either brought up negative emotions or it was just dead boring. And then something happened. When I was about 27 years old, I met someone who encouraged me to sign up for a marathon that he was running. It was a marathon taking place in Iraqi Kurdistan, which is a place that I was interested in traveling to. And I thought, okay, a marathon. Yeah, that sounds like something that everyone should do at least once in their lives. So I signed up. Not because I loved running, but because I felt like it was something I should try and something I should at least attempt. So when the day of the marathon came, I just went for it. I tried to follow my friend's advice. Don't go too fast, don't go too slow. And I ran it. It took me a little while to finish. I don't remember my exact time, but it took me a while. And, I got to the finish line and I just felt quite accomplished. I was so happy. I did it. Of course, in the following days, I immediately regretted it because of the horrible pain and soreness I got to experience. But I think that first marathon was really the first time that I felt like I could actually enjoy this running thing. And so from then on, I decided to run more often. I was realizing that I really should be trying to stay in shape given my crazy nomadic lifestyle, and that running was really just the easiest way to do that. I didn't need any special equipment. I could just go out the door and go for a run for half an hour, whatever it took. it just seemed to be the lowest hanging fruit. But there was one problem. I still wasn't really enjoying it. I really didn't enjoy running in city parks, and I really didn't enjoy running along pavements. And whenever I went running in the gym on a treadmill, I found it so mind-numbingly boring. I just couldn't connect to that joy that I had felt running my first marathon. Until everything changed, as it of course does always. So this one time that I wanted to go for a run in Turkey, I realized that there wasn't much of a pavement to run on there, but there was this trail nearby, like a nature hiking trail. So I thought, maybe I can go for a run on that trail. So I went running on the trail, and the trail led me through meadows and forests, along the coast, up to the mountain, down the mountain, to some truly magical places. And I was in awe. I couldn't believe that running could take me to such beautiful places. I'd somehow never thought of it. I spent so much time thinking that running is only running when you're running on pavement or on a treadmill. This felt different. That time, running on that trail, I felt so adventurous, it was so much fun, you know? That is when I truly fell in love with running. As soon as I came to terms with the fact that I would be a trail runner, that's when I deleted my Strava. And deleting my Strava account was such a big and powerful move for me because it removed all pressure. I was no longer sharing the stats of my runs with people that I barely knew or didn't know. I was running for myself because it made me feel good. Suddenly it made me feel good. Suddenly it felt great. Suddenly I loved it because I loved being out there, out in nature. And so the more I ran and the more I trained, the more I realized that I just want to be out there. I just want to be running for as long as I possibly can. And that's what led me to sign up to my first ultramarathon 2 years ago in Turkey. That first ultramarathon that I ran was 63 kilometers. A year later, I signed up to do another one, and that was 81 kilometers. Both were in the mountains. And finally, this year, 109 kilometers, 68 miles. The longest I would have ever run in a single day. In fact, the cutoff was 18 hours, so in 18 hours. When the day finally came, I was just hoping that I would make it to the finish line. I knew that running 68 miles in the mountains, in the cold and rain, would be a pretty huge challenge for me. It was like my least favorite weather. I was on my period. I felt like I hadn't trained enough. It just felt like it would be tough. Of course, it's 68 miles. What am I talking about? So I was kind of surprised to find that the first 40 miles or so went really well. I felt great. I felt actually really light and super happy to just be out there, you know, running through the forest and, you know, running with other people, seeing how fast they're moving and just, you know, feeding off that energy that we were all sharing and taking part in. That was awesome. Other crazy people, just as crazy as me, maybe even more crazy, doing this run through the woods together. But then about 40 miles in, my morale really changed. I got completely soaked through and through, down to my underwear, and felt very cold, very tired, and I think just a little bit in my head. I started thinking about how this is all just so surreal and like kind of pointless. And so I really struggled the last 30 or so miles. It was really a huge mental and physical challenge for me. I remember just getting so incredibly emotional at one point. when it got dark and the rain started falling more and more heavily. I was running down this pretty steep and technical downhill trail, and I was all alone. There was nobody else around me, just me and my little light ahead of me, just a little, spot of light indicating the way. And I just felt so profoundly emotional. I started weeping, I started crying, sobbing so heavily that there were moments when I really couldn't run anymore. When I started sobbing on that stretch, it felt incredibly cathartic. It felt like I was letting go of so many negative things, of pain, of limitations, of all the limits that I had imposed on myself. And it felt incredibly cleansing to just be out there crying, sobbing, trying to run. And I think that was probably the highlight of the entire run for me. Sobbing alone in the forest, in the dark, great. I somehow made it to the last aid station, which was really, really hard to reach by the end of it because the trail started going uphill again, which I hadn't expected. And I really felt at one point that I wouldn't make it. I had about an hour left until the cutoff, which is when they finish the race. They end the race. So if you come after the cutoff, you get disqualified. I started cursing a lot. I started getting really angry with myself, and eventually somehow plucked up the last remaining energy that I had somewhere deep inside me, and I ran. I ran the last 4 kilometers as fast as I could, and I ended up making it to the finish line half an hour before the final cutoff. I made it! In 17 and a half hours, I managed to run 68 miles, 109 kilometers with 3,500 meters elevation gain. I couldn't believe it. I mean, truth be told, I was kind of towards the end of the running pack. I am not a fast runner. I am a very mediocre runner. I can just run far, not fast, far. And it was so magical to just get there at the finish line and realize that, oh my God, this body is capable of running that distance? What else is it capable of? So a question that I got from someone on Instagram after my race was, well, did you get to the finish line and swear to yourself that you would never do it again? It's quite the opposite. The moment I got to the finish line, I was like, when do I get to do this again? Okay, so here comes the big question. Why? Why would anybody do such a thing to themselves? Why would you ever choose to run a ridiculous distance without anyone chasing you or forcing you to? And I think that's a pretty good question, especially considering the fact that I used to hate running and I used to hate working out. So why? First of all, because we can. I mean, isn't it just so mind-blowing to know that our bodies can run that kind of distance? This body is a machine. And I'm not just talking about my body, I'm talking about all of our bodies. We are built to run. Our ancestors used to run massive distances pursuing animals and prey. We are built for this. Yes, running looks very, very different today than what it used to. I mean, I already told you that I hate running on pavement and I hate running on treadmills, but I love running out there in nature on trails. And that takes me to my second reason. The second reason why is because running out there in these wild places is just such an incredible adventure in its own right. You're out there surrounded by trees and mountains on a wild quest to cover a huge distance, to survive out there, just relying on you, yourself, your mind and body to get there. And that is just such a rare thing these days. We really rarely get the opportunity to do things like this. So whenever I find myself running in a pack, that is, there's people, in front of me and behind me, I just find that such a hypnotizing experience, and it really feels like it allows me to reconnect with some ancestral part of myself. I can imagine that back in the day, humans would do this. They would run through the forest together, out on a hunt, out getting food for the village. And I know that may sound a little bit out there, but that's just the feeling I get. It makes me feel human. Running out there, running out in nature just makes me feel really human and really connected to my humanity. And here is the third reason as to why people, I guess, do ultra runs, or at least why I love running such long distances. And maybe this one is the most important. I love running far because every single time I do, it changes me. There is a subtle but very, very marked change and transformation that happens when your body and mind, when you put yourself through a challenge like that. It's not something you do every day. It's not a guarantee of success. It's not something that is even, you don't get that much recognition for it, honestly. It's just something that you do because you feel called to it, because you want to see if you can make it. You want to test yourself. Every single ultra marathon I've done changed me in some way. And there's some obvious things like, you finish and you realize that you can do very hard things. Or you finish and you realize that what you thought were your limits are not actually your limits at all, that you could do much more, that you can push yourself much further. There's definitely a sense of power and strength that I think I get from running. And it's not power and strength in an ego way, it's just power and strength in a resilience way, if that makes sense. It makes me feel resilient. It makes me feel like I can get through a lot, and it makes me feel that if I can do this, then, the sky's the limit. So that's my story. I call myself a late bloomer athlete because I didn't love running for most of my life, and I only really started to get into it when I was 30 years old. I don't think it's ever too late to start, and the thing that's, I think, the most important lesson from all of this is that you need to find your thing. It might not be obvious. You may need to try different things to find your thing. Your thing could turn out to be super niche. I still hate running on treadmills, and I still hate running on pavement. I like running on trails, and that's a very, very specific thing. So keep looking for your thing. You will eventually find it. And just remember that whenever you're doing it, you should feel free and alive and reconnected to a deeper sense of humanity that's, within all of us. And that's why I love running. And that's why I love running very long distances. So what's next, you may ask? I have some cool races planned for the next year. I'm not going to reveal them just yet, but there's definitely some ambition in there to run a 100-mile ultra. I think that would be the next natural step. Don't ask me how, don't ask me when, you now know why. But if I manage to do it, in fact, I'll attempt to do it. And whether I manage to cross the finish line or not, I will definitely make an update video about it. That's it from me, but I would love to hear from you. How do you feel about running? Have you ever tried running a marathon or a half marathon or even an ultra marathon? And if so, what was it like? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to read your stories.